Hello, art history students. Welcome to Impressionism through Postmodernism, your online art history class this quarter. My name is Rachel Dorn. You can call me Rachel or Ms. Dorn. Either one is fine. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what the class is going to be. The syllabus tells you some of this as well, but I thought it'd be nice to hear it. So we are looking at Western art, or I should actually say we are looking at Western modern art in Europe and the United States until the very end of the class, and then we're going to look at globe art happening all over the world. Global art, I suppose. So modern art specifically means art made in the modern era, and most of that is in the 20th century. Depending who you ask, we're going to sneak back into the 19th century a little bit. And we are actually going to start our class in the 19th century, which is the 1800s, because to understand the changes that happen at the turn of the century, from the 1800s to the 1900s, it's helpful to understand what was going on already. What we are not going to talk about is all the art that came before. So I teach this series, Impressionism through Postmodernism, Art 282, is the third in a series. Now, don't worry, you didn't have to take the other two. In fact, I think this quarter there's no one who's already taken the other two in the series, except me. That's fine, no worries. But some of the stuff in the book sort of assumes you've already read that stuff. So I'm going to try to backfill a little bit of that for you in the very first chapter, or the very first content chapter we cover. And then we will move into the 20th century. At the end of the class, we're going to actually look at postmodern art, which, as you can tell by the name, is after modern, which is kind of weird, right? Modern seems like it should be what's happening now. But what's happening now is really technically contemporary art, contemporary to us. We'll deal with all this language as we get to it. But when we get into postmodern and specifically contemporary art happening now, we're going to spread out a little bit. So we're going to start in Europe, and we're going to pay particular attention to France, but be in Europe generally, until, and that's where our focus will basically remain until we get about to World War II. So the middle of the 20th century, something happens in Europe you might be familiar with, and a lot of people and a lot of artists a lot of artists in particular move to the United States. So we're going to spend some time in the United States looking at art. We're also going to spend a little bit of time in Mexico, in particular in the middle part of the 20th century. And then, like I said, we'll spread out over the globe at the very end of the quarter. So when we talk about art history, and in the next module, I'm going to talk to you about some methods for how we're going to examine art history. But I want to give you a framework of what art history is, because this is not art appreciation. In an art appreciation class, you would just look at some art and say, oh, it looks nice, right? Or you would learn about some of the methods and things. We are going to ask some very particular questions when we look at art. So I've got my list of who, what, when, where, why, how. And some of these questions are going to apply or be more important depending on the time period. But when you look at this artwork, you can see who the subject is. You might also be able to take a guess at who made this or who it was made for. So I often talk about this particular piece when I'm talking about feminist art. Look at this artwork. Who was this painted for? Who is supposed to be looking at this painting, or who is it designed? I'm saying this strangely, but who's in power here in this image? Who's in control of the image? Who's it designed for? And through me stumbling through the explanation there, I'm hoping that you're answering along with me. Who is this designed for? Clearly, this is designed for a man looking at heterosexual man looking at this beautiful woman. That is part of the meaning of the work, or the stuff that kind of surrounds the work. This was made at a very particular time and place, the early 1800s, 1814. You can see down here in the caption, and it was made to sort of be beautiful, be looked at, this woman's body, and sort of a sense of exoticism as well. How romantic it would be to, the La Grande Odalisque refers to like a woman in a harem. And it's a really sort of beautiful idea of what a harem is actually like. Understanding all of that gives you a different understanding than if you were to just look at this and be like, hey, you know, her back looks a little funny. Doesn't it look funny? It's got extra bones or something going on there. So we're going to try to explore some of these questions about not just how it was made and what it looks like, but who it was made for and why it was made this way. Now, I've skipped ahead in time about 100 years. 1913 here. The last one was 1814. So 99 years. What is this about? Now, here it's a little bit harder to recognize the subject. And what you guys don't know yet, officially, right, in class, is why this was made. What was the artist trying to do? Boccioni here, the artist, was really interested in the idea of speed and movement, and he wanted to capture this sense of speed and movement in this sculpture here. He was a futurist. That was the style in which he was making sculpture. And this was happening 1913. What's going on? Well, we have vehicles, cars, and planes and stuff are fairly new. We're going to war, or we're on our way to war, 1913, and this was in Italy. And the world just seemed to be moving fast. Looking back at this from today, if I asked you, okay, for your art project tomorrow, I want you to go make something that has a sense of movement in it, what would you make today? I would think most of you would make a video, right? A video where you're filming someone moving. But of course, think about this. In 1913, they weren't making videos. And so understanding when this was made and what the artist was trying to do at the time, as well as what the artist had available to him at the time, and this is a guy, the male artist, what was available to artists at the time is important to understand why the artwork was made. Today, we wouldn't solve this visual problem, or we wouldn't express movement in stone, in bronze, in metal. Now, I want to give you a little bit of a preview. That was a preview as well. We'll talk about that artwork later. But I also want to give you a bit of a preview into Unit 1. This is the introductory chapter in your textbook. Take a look at this painting, or this artwork, and I'm not telling you what it is or who it is, but take a look at this and think about what your reaction is to this work. What do you notice about it? What is it of? What do you see here? So I'm hoping that you're answering along with me, and I want to give you that opportunity to think this through. But I haven't given you any information about why it was made or who made it. Now, do you think that if I asked you to paint a picture of your best friend or something like that, I'll give you some paints and set you down with it, would this be the way you would paint your friend? Probably not, right? And part of that is your culture. You've grown up in a Western culture. Probably. I know some of you may not have, but we're all living in the United States. Many of us in this part of the state have grown up here, or maybe we've grown up somewhere else, but we've moved here. But a lot of us would be more likely to paint our friend in something similar to this. Don't worry about the clothing. The clothing is old, right? But the way the face is painted, the fact that we see he's kind of got his head turned to one side. We can really easily see where his hair is, and we can see his ear, and we can see some shading that shows us that his face is round and his nose sticks out. There's a little bit of a shadow next to his nose right here. This is somebody who's painting a picture of a person with different rules in his life. He knows, okay, this is what art is supposed to look like. This painting was done at a different time by similar time, different artist who grew up in a different culture and learned a different set of rules about what art is supposed to look like. Now, in the 20th century, we're going to see a lot of artists who intentionally make their own rules. This is the rules of how art should be made, more or less, at the very start of our class, when we're going to start looking at the 1800s. But when we move into the 20th century, we're going to see people who say, that's not how art should be made. It should be made this way. And in this class, we're going to explore why. What are the influences that help an artwork be made in this way as opposed to in this way? So I think this is going to be a super fun, interesting class. I like it, and I hope you're going to enjoy it too. We're going to deal with some complex issues of why art is being made one way or the other, and to do that, we're going to have to build up our understanding of some language associated with art. The next couple of videos introduce you to just how to get around in Canvas and the expectations for the class. In the Unit 1 module, I'm going to talk to you about how, sort of starting our language for how we're going to talk about art history. All right. Thank you.